Hello viewers, welcome back to our series of lectures on NMR spectroscopy. Today we will continue our discussion and talk about recording of NMR spectrum and the characteristics of spectrum we get in the process. The session is planned as follows, that is, to begin with we will try to take a brief review of the previous sessions. Thereafter we will talk about recording of NMR spectra. We will talk about two ways of doing the same. One is CW NMR, that is continuous wave NMR, and second is FT NMR. Then thereafter we will talk about what are the advantages of FT NMR over continuous wave NMR spectroscopy, and then we will talk about the characteristics of NMR spectrum. And having outlined all those, we will talk about one of the characteristics, that is chemical shift, and towards the end we will try to sum up what we do in today's session. Okay. Now, let us make a beginning by recalling what we have done so far. What we have done so far is we started by defining what is NMR spectroscopy and stated its importance. Thereafter, we identified different types of nuclei which are active in NMR spectroscopy and discussed the properties arising because of their nuclear spin. And then we explained the consequences of placing such a nuclear spin, that is with I is equal to half in a magnetic field, and then we came down to talking about the meaning and significance of Larmor precession, and towards the end we talked about the resonance, because we are talking about nuclear magnetic resonance. So, we talked about the nuclear aspect, then the magnetic properties of that, then we came down to the meaning of resonance in NMR. Having done that, we towards the end we talked about different ways in which an excited nucleus relaxes down. We talked about spin lattice and spin-spin relaxation times. Now, let us begin with how do we record NMR spectrum. As I just mentioned, there are two ways of recording NMR. One is CW NMR or continuous wave NMR spectrometry. Let us begin with that first. Now, typically an NMR spectrometer consists of the following components, that is, you have a permanent magnet which is shown here by two poles there, north and south pole over there. Then you have got one radio frequency oscillator, a source of EM radiation for us, which will be generating radio frequency for us. And then we have got, because there are two coils here, one is an input coil by which we give the radio frequency, and second is a coil which picks up the signal from there, and that is a receiver coil there. Then we got an amplifier, and that comes out to as an output to a signal over there. So, and then of course, we have a sample tubing wherein we keep our sample in the form of a solution there. So, that is as regards the spectrometer per se. But in order to understand or appreciate this, we need to recall the basic premise, that is the meaning of resonance in NMR. If you remember that when we talked about the principle of NMR, we said that when you take a nucleus of I is equal to half and put it into a magnetic field, what happens is this nuclei which act as a tiny bar magnet can either align with the magnetic field or go against it. With the magnetic field is of low energy, against it of a high energy. That means you generate two energy levels there. And if you can provide a radio frequency of suitable frequency, then the excitation can take place there. So, that is what can happen over there. But besides this, the second thing which happens when we put a nucleus into magnetic field is that it starts precessing, and the precessional frequency also is proportional to the applied magnetic field or the external magnetic field there. Now, when I take a nucleus put into a magnetic field, it starts precessing at a certain precessional frequency. I give radio frequency, when the two match, then excitation takes place. So, that actually is made use of in this spectrometer here, and there are two ways of doing the experiment there. The first one is what we do, that we keep that magnetic field to be fixed, say 2.4 Tesla, 2.3 Tesla or whatever. We keep the magnetic field as fixed one. On that particular magnetic field, a given nucleus will precess at certain frequency there. Then what we do? We give radio frequency and continuously change that. That means, if I have say a molecule of alcohol or benzene or any molecule for that matter, so there are different protons there, so they will be precessing at certain frequencies there. When I give a radio frequency, because at the given field they are precessing at different frequencies, when I give radio frequency, whichever radio frequency matches, that particular proton will absorb and it get excited. Okay. So, I will get a spectrum in that process. That is what is called as frequency scan. That is, I keep the field fixed and scan the frequencies. Alternatively, what we can do is we can do what's called as a field sweep. That is, we keep the frequency fixed. Say I keep the radio frequency at say 100 megahertz and I have certain amount of field. The given nucleus is processing at a frequency of say 97 megahertz. So, there is no transition there. I increase the field, the processor frequency increases, I go on increasing the field, the moment it becomes equal to fixed frequency, the transition will take place. So, we can conduct the experiment in two possible ways. In one, we keep the field fixed, vary the frequency. Second, we keep the frequency fixed and vary the field. So, they are typically called as field sweep or the frequency sweep. Typically, because of the convenience point of view, or rather in terms of instrumentation point of view, normally we go for the field sweep. We keep the frequency fixed and vary the field over there, because that is easier to manage, because we can do electromagnets are used there. We can tune our electromagnets and generate the field of the right kind. That is how NMR spectrometers are known by their frequencies they are working at, say 100 megahertz, 300 megahertz or 200 megahertz. Of nowadays we talk about even 500 and 700 megahertz, very large frequencies are there. So, that is the way we conduct our a continuous wave NMR spectrum. Now, this way of doing is very convenient, rather it is an older way of doing things, and it has got certain drawbacks there. The drawbacks are as follows, that is, the time it takes for a scan to complete. A scan means I have to start the radio frequency at a certain value or the field at a certain value, scan through the whole thing. That is, all the possible protons or the nuclei in the molecule are getting excited over there. That takes about a few minutes, maybe 2 or 3 minutes or so. Secondly, in order to maintain, because we are using electromagnets there, it may so happen in terms of operational part of it, the stability of magnetic field is an issue in that case, because in order to maintain that magnetic field does not change at all, that is little difficult to manage. That is one issue with it is a kind of a drawback with CWNMR. The third one is the signal to noise ratio. That means, whenever you have a spectrum there, so there is some noise is there and then a signal is there. So, typically NMR spectra are very kind of weak in this thing. That means, the signal to noise ratio is very low. That means, you can't distinguish between signal and noise, because they are very similar in size over there. So, one way of doing this is that we can do multiple scans for that. Multiple scans means you take a spectrum, take another one, go on doing that. That means, you take multiple scans. In the process, wherever the signal is there, signal will always come at the same frequency, whereas noise will be random. Suppose I take a given spectrum, signal to noise ratio is very small. I do 100 scans for the same thing, and all 100 times my signal will come at the same position, whereas the noise will be random. When I add all 100 spectra together, my signal will become 100 times, and the noise will actually come out to be about 10 times only, square root of n. N is the number of scans I do. Okay. So, when I do that, I can improve the signal to noise ratio, but the time will be very, very large. If I have to take 100 scans, I have to use about 300 minutes, which is a very long duration for a given spectrum to be obtained there. Okay. Let us move further. Let us talk about the second type of spectrometry, or FT-NMR. FT stands for Fourier transform NMR spectrometry. We just mentioned that NMR spectra are intrinsically very weak. Secondly, in addition to other issues there, the intensity of NMR signal actually depends on the concentration, and concentration means we have to have because the volume of sample we take is very small, say about 0.5 centimeter cube. In order to make the concentration to be large, so we need a reasonably good amount of the material or the molecule the compound whose NMR spectrum we want to take, and for biological systems this becomes very difficult. It becomes very difficult to even talk about a milligram of a compound. So, in such cases what happens is, again the way out is that we can do repeated scans, but we know that it is time consuming. There is an alternative. The alternative happens to be what is called as FT-NMR or pulse NMR. Let us understand what is the principle of FT-NMR. What we do here is, that is, we take the sample, put into magnetic field, that everything is happening the way it was happening earlier. But now, instead of tuning my radio frequency, what I do is I give a pulse of radio frequency. When I give a pulse basically is a kind of a packet, and that pulse contains all the radio frequencies in one go. Okay. So, when I do that, then what happens? Since it contains all the frequencies in the range, then what happens? All the nuclei in the sample, all of them will get simultaneously excited. Earlier what we are doing was we are tuning radio frequency. Whenever the frequency will match, the nucleus will get excited there. So, in this case now, in the case of FTNMR, we are giving a pulse. When you are giving a pulse, all the nuclei are excited simultaneously, then they all relax down to the ground state simultaneously again. And then this relaxation actually is characterized by what is called as an FID, free induction decay. It is basically a signal in time domain. That means, we have got a large signal, as time passes by, signal becomes smaller and smaller, it fades out in time. Now, this is FID, which is got as an output from there. And what we do then is that I give another pulse now. That means, I have a sample here in the magnetic field, I give a pulse, all the nuclei get excited, they relax down, I give another pulse, they again get excited, they relax back, I give another pulse. I keep doing that, and this whole process of giving pulse, excitation and relaxation takes a few seconds, and then we give another pulse there. So, as a consequence of this way of doing things, and all this we can do multiple scans, because when even a given scan is taking about a few seconds, 2 or 3 or 4 seconds, that is all. So, I can do multiple scans, and as a consequence of that, all these scans, all the FIDs what I get, they all are stored in the machine or in a computer, and then they are put together, and then the sum total of that actually is what is called as a Fourier transform. That this signal which is I get as an FID, which is the signal in time domain, I Fourier transform. Fourier transform basically is a mathematical transformation. That means, we transform the signal from the time domain to signal in the frequency domain, which is my NMR spectrum. So, that is the technique what is called as FTNMR. I just showed you one. So, this is another kind of FID, because the previous FID I showed you here, it corresponds to a given signal only. Say we have got 2 line signal there, I have a different kind of FID, or maybe you can have a very complicated FID over there. When it gets Fourier transformed, it gets into a nice spectrum over there. So, all molecules will have their own kind of FIDs depending on the kind of signals which are contained in the spectrum over there. Now, let us see what are the advantages of using FTNMR. They are as follows. That is, as we just mentioned, that collecting an FID or making one scan takes a few seconds. That is, I can do multiple scans. That means, we can do hundreds of scans in a matter of few minutes, and all those issues which were there in case of CWNMR are taken care of. And then in the process, what we can do is we can achieve a good signal to noise ratio. We get very beautiful, nice spectra which can be put to interpretation and make use of there. Let us talk about the characteristics of NMR spectrum. Typically, an NMR spectrum looks like this. That is, there are set of lines over there which are spread over a range of frequencies there. Now, it has got certain characteristics. Let us look at them. And the characteristics are, the first one is the position, that is where the signal is coming there. This actually is referred to as chemical shift, and actually is a measure of or the indicator of the chemical nature of the proton. I am talking about proton NMR. So, what kind of proton are we talking about? What is the chemical nature of that? That is indicated by the position of signal. Second characteristic happens to be the area under the curves, because each signal will have certain area there. So, each one of them can be taken care of, and that actually is typically represented in terms of some kind of integration there, and that gives you the number of nuclei of a given type. That means, position tells me about the chemical nature, area under the curve gives me the number of nuclei of a given type. That means, what is the nuclei of this type, and so on and so forth. The third characteristic is what is called as the nature of signal. What you see is this is a different kind of signal. So, is all these signals are of different types from each other, and these basically are indicative of the interaction between different nuclei. We will talk about each characteristic one by one. Now, let us first see what is the meaning of position. Let me elaborate a little there. Now, this is a spectrum of ethanol. In case of ethanol, there are 3 types of protons which are coming at different positions there, indicative of their chemical nature, because this terminal proton of that is a methyl proton or this methylene proton or this proton attached to an oxygen atom, they all are different chemically. This is an acidic proton, this is not. So, they come at different positions. We will elaborate on this at a later stage. Secondly, as I just mentioned, area under the curve. Now, if you look at the same spectrum, what you find is, this all is done by computers there, we do not have to do anything manually in this case. So, what you find is the spectrum of ethanol again. So, we got 3 signals there. The area under the curve here actually is indicated by this trace over there, which is given as a red line there. This is called as a integration curve. This again is done by the machine, and this basically measures the area under the peak there and gives it as a step over there. Now, what you see is the height of this step here, and compare that with this one and this one, we find that they are in the ratio of 1:2:3. That is, the protons in case of the molecule whose NMR spectrum is being shown over there, they are in the ratio of 1:2:3, and since it happens to be ethanol, so we know they actually are 1, 2 and 3. The integration trace gives me the ratio of different types of proton there. Then the third one is the nature of signal, that is spin-spin coupling here. What you find is this signal here, which we mentioned earlier, is because of the OH proton there. This is a singlet, it has a one line in this. This is a 4-line spectrum there, a 4-line signal, this is referred to as a quartet, and this is a 3-line signal, this is referred to as a triplet there. We will talk about it in very much details in one of the sessions in future. Now, let us move further and understand about the first of the characteristics there, what is called as chemical shift. Let us understand this. Let us recall that in earlier sessions we talked about the resonance condition for observing the transition in case of a nucleus. We talked about a bare nucleus, we just talked about a proton. The frequency condition was that the frequency required is Gn mu n B naught by h, and all of the terms show that you all remember that Gn is the nuclear G factor, this is nuclear magneton, this is the applied field strength, and this h is the Planck's constant there. If this be so, then what we expect is all the nuclei of a given type in a sample should absorb the same frequency. That means, in principle all protons in a given molecule should come at the same frequency, because according to this the nature of proton is not coming into picture at all. That means, all protons should come at the same frequency, or even all carbon 13 nuclei will come at the same frequency, different from that of proton, but they will come at the same frequency as per this formula there. That means, if that be so, then NMR is of no use to a chemist, because if all protons in case of say a molecule of ethanol or so, they come at the same position, I can't make any sense out of it. However, what happens is any molecule you take, we never deal with the nuclei which are bare. That means, we do not deal with protons per se, we deal with hydrogen atoms or hydrogen atoms in molecules there. I am referring only to the proton NMR. Now, if that be so, then what happens is all these nuclei, the proton I am talking about, because who is responsible for the spectrum there, they are surrounded by some kind of electrons, and that modify the applied field experienced by them. That is very, very important here. That is, I have a hydrogen atom in a molecule, say ethanol, I am talking about one hydrogen atom there. In a hydrogen atom, there is a nucleus in the center, which is actually undergoing all this whole processes I am talking about. But this nucleus is not bare, it is not alone anywhere, it is surrounded by some kind of electron clouds on there, and that actually modifies the field which is field experienced by the nucleus. And as a consequence, what happens is the nuclei are either shielded or de-shielded from the applied field, and as a consequence what happens is they come to resonance at different frequencies. Because if you now recall our spectrum of ethanol, say methyl proton there, methylene proton, OH, hydroxy proton there. So, they are in different chemical environment. Because of the different chemical environment, they have got different kind of electron densities around the protons there. As a consequence, they come to resonance at different frequencies. And this shift in frequency due to chemical nature of nuclei is termed as chemical shift. That is the first and foremost characteristic of our NMR spectrum, very, very important for us. We will elaborate on this. Okay. Now, let us understand when we said shielding and de-shielding, let us look at this. we have a proton here which is responsible for my NMR spectrum there. This proton is not alone, it is surrounded by an electron cloud there which is much larger there. And these electrons which are circulating around the nuclei, they generate, because this atom is in the magnetic field there. So, they will generate some kind of an induced field there. Okay. So, this induced field is because of the circulation of electrons around the nucleus. And this field here, if you just see it closely here, so the downward arrows here, they are of the magnetic field which has been induced by because of the circulating electrons. So, this magnetic field actually is opposing the applied magnetic field. Applied magnetic field is this thick arrow over here. So, applied field is like this, my induced field is opposing it. So, as a consequence what happens is that this nucleus is experiencing lesser field than what is being applied there. As a consequence, this kind of a effect is called as diamagnetic effect, and the magnetic field experienced by the proton is less than the applied field. As a consequence, I will need a different frequency for it to come to resonance. Let us understand that little more closely. Look at this. Now, let us take a bare proton. We have a bare proton, and let me apply certain magnetic field, say 2.3486 Tesla. This is typical field required for bare proton to absorb at 100 megahertz. Okay. So, I apply field of 2.3486 Tesla, there is no electron around this, the field experienced by the nucleus here is the same what has been applied there. So, this is BE is the experience field, this is the applied field there. So, this will come to resonance at 100 megahertz, because that is the frequency at which the bare nucleus will absorb at this field there. This is basic. Okay. Now, if I have got an hydrogen atom, I just take one hydrogen atom. In case of one hydrogen atom, I apply the same amount of field. Then the field which is experienced by this nucleus now will be less than the applied field there. We just explained that, because these electrons here which are surrounding the nucleus, they will generate an induced field, and that induced field will be opposing the applied field. So, as a consequence, the effective field on the nucleus will be lesser than the applied field. As a consequence, this will come to resonance at a frequency which will be lesser than the 100 megahertz which was there for the bare proton there. That is the meaning of the kind of contribution of the electron cloud around the nucleus. This is about an isolated hydrogen atom now. Let us move further and talk about a hydrogen atom in a molecule. Say, let me just say this is a hydrogen atom attached to an oxygen atom there. Now, what happens? Or oxygen atom, or to a say lithium atom, or whatever. So, if it is in a molecule like this, I apply the same amount of field. Then what can happen is the field experienced by the nucleus now will depend on the nature of the atom I am talking about over here. Now, suppose I have got an atom which is electronegative, it will pull out the electrons from there. So, the electron density will decrease, the field which has been generated by this will be lesser. As a consequence, the experienced field will be B double prime I mentioned over here, being indicated here, that will be more than B prime, but less than the applied field there. Or other possibility could be, that is, we have certain things, say lithium here, and lithium is more electropositive than hydrogen. So, electrons will come over there, the kind of charge density will increase. As a consequence, the induced field will increase, and thereby the field experience will be different from that there. As a consequence, what happens is the frequency at which this proton will absorb will be different from that of a isolated proton there, and this is what is going to matter now. That means, when I talk about a molecule, in the molecule different hydrogen atoms, we typically call them as protons, they are in different environment there. So, depending on what kind of nuclei are there next to that, what kind of atom is there next to that, as a consequence the neighboring atoms there, they modify the electron behavior over here. As a consequence, the induced field is manipulated, and as a consequence the frequency at which they come to resonance gets altered there, and thereby what we see is that in a given molecule different hydrogen atoms come to resonance at different frequencies, and that is what is called as nuclear shielding effect. Let us look at this whole thing mathematically. Let us say let us apply let the applied field be B naught and the induced field be B induced. Okay, that's just assuming over there. So, effective field which will be experienced by the nuclei will be given by the following expression there, that is, this is B effective, which is this is applied field there, B induced is which is induced because of the circulation of electrons there. Now, second thing we have to take note of here is that is this induced field which is generated by the circulating electrons, that actually is proportional to the applied field, that is B induced can be given as something like sigma B naught, and the sigma is called as the shielding constant. Okay. Now, I can just substitute it back over here and see what we get. What do we get is that B effective is equal to B naught minus sigma B naught. Simplify a little, take B naught common, it is 1 minus sigma. That means, B effective is B naught 1 minus sigma. Okay. Now, this due to the extra nuclear electrons, the resonance condition gets modified now, because this the electrons behavior will change depending on the neighboring atoms and all. As a consequence, our effective condition for resonance now comes out to be Gn mu n B naught 1 minus sigma oblique H, and or we can say it is B effective over here. What it means is, what it implies is that in order to get resonance at the fixed frequency, the applied field needs to be increased. It is an upfield shift over there. So, what we discussed so far is some kind of nuclear shielding effect. There is another possibility, that is we can even have nuclear de-shielding. Let us understand this. What happens is, in certain molecules what you can have, there are certain nuclei which contain, which are paramagnetic in nature, or maybe they got pi electrons or conjugated electrons are there. So, in such cases what can happen is, that is, I am just giving one example here, we will elaborate on this in one of the further sessions there. Now, in this case what you find that because of this is the kind of a system is having a pi electrons there. So, when I apply magnetic field there, so these pi electrons they get into circulation, but of a different kind. As a consequence, the kind of field what they generate, that the induced field what they generate, actually you have a proton here. So, we find that at this proton here, this field actually is augmenting the applied field, that means adding on to that. So, in this case is basically is kind of a de-shielding, because earlier what we had was the electrons were there, they were trying to shield the nucleus from the applied field. Now, we got a situation wherein this nucleus is getting the field here is getting augmented there. As a consequence, the effective field which is at the nucleus is more than the applied field. So, as a consequence, what you get is that in such cases we can say the sigma value happen to be negative and nucleus had to be de-shielded over there. Signal goes downfield. We will explain all this at a later stage. Thus, we can say that the chemical shift may be defined as the variation in absorption frequencies for different nuclei in the molecule because of arising due to the electronic shielding and de-shielding effects. That is one way of putting chemical shift into perspective there. And we know that the chemical shifts of each signal in the NMR spectrum gives information about the structural environment of the nuclei producing that particular signal there. Because if you look at, if you recall our spectrum of ethanol, so this OH here, so we can see that it is coming at a very different value than that of a CH3. So, that actually indicates that they are in different chemical or structural environments there. We will elaborate on this in the next session. Okay. Let us sum up what we have done today. What we have done today is, we started by recalling the contents of the previous sessions. Thereafter, we explained the types of recordings, that means different ways of recording NMR spectra, wherein we talked about the CW NMR, that is continuous wave NMR, and FT NMR. Thereafter, we talked about the advantages of FT NMR over CW NMR. Having done that, we outlined the characteristics of NMR spectrum, wherein we talked about the chemical shift, we talked about integration or the area under the curve, and also the nature of spectrum, what kind of spectrum are we getting there. And then we started by starting our discussion on one of the characteristics, that happens to be chemical shift, and we explained the meaning of chemical shift in terms of shielding and de-shielding of the electrons there. And in the next session now, we will continue from here and talk about different factors which affect the chemical shift, because that is very important, because our ultimate objective is to interpret, to take NMR spectrum and decipher the structure from there. So, in order to understand that, we need to understand that what is the origin of all the characteristics of the spectrum which are coming and how are they related to the structure of molecules. So, that we will take up in the next session there. Thank you.